Greetings everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Fanfic Read-Through. I am Tsubaki94, and as always, I'm reading my Danny Phantom fanfic for you. Sit yourself comfortable, adjust those headphones, check the volume, and let's begin. Life's Trial, Chapter 31 to 32. If the last week had been tiring, the second week was a strain on Danny. The only time he hadn't used his copy to be at two places at the same time was during nights when he was sleeping and during school hours. After school, he spent some time with Sam and Tucker before flying back to Wishing Hill. He would leave a copy of himself at Mrs. Oswald's home and fly to the library, where he helped Dash with his schoolwork. It was a silent agreement that as long as Danny helped Dash pass his school subjects, he wouldn't bully Danny, and as long as Dash didn't pick on Danny, he would continue to help Dash with the schoolwork. Making sure that he got back before 7, Danny merged with his double and ate dinner with the rest of the people in the house. After that, he lay on his bed nursing a migraine that got worse every time he split and remerged, and only the exhaustion of patrolling Amity Park, fighting ghosts, and stopping 2 more teens from committing suicide let him sleep. Mrs. Stewart had come by that Wednesday and talked to Mrs. Oswald for a bit, before knocking on Danny's door to give him a new time and a place for his session with a psychiatrist called Gideon Stone that Friday. Glancing down at the note with the address that Friday, Danny glared up at the building the address belonged to. On his right was the building he'd been in the previous Friday, the building where all the social service people in town had an office space. On the left were the local nut house. Grace Road Psychiatric Hospital was a 5-story tall old brick building, and partly because of the rain and gloom looked like the old North Mercy Hospital at the outskirts of Amity Park. "Please tell me there's no connection between the two places," said Danny to himself as he rubbed the spot between his eyebrows, trying to ward off the oncoming migraine. When it didn't work, he glanced at his watch and sighed. He really didn't want to do this, but if he wanted to be home with his family again, he had no choice. Mustering all the courage and confidence he could, he walked in through the front doors of Grace Road Hospital. The entrance hall looked like any other hospital. There were a reception desk, signs, a waiting area, snack machine, and potted plants in every corner. Walking up to the receptionist, Danny talked to the woman sitting behind the desk for a few minutes, before he was asked to sit down and wait. Slouching down in an empty chair, Danny rubbed his temples. Trying to ignore all the sounds coming from the people in the building, he waited. He had almost dozed off when a blond man in a pair of worn tight jeans and blue shirt called his name. Sighing, Danny got up from his chair and walked over to the man. "Hello, you must be Daniel. Nice to meet you. I'm Dr. Gideon Stone, but you can call me Gideon," the man said, giving Danny a hand to shake. "Danny," answered Danny, taking the man's hand. "Nice to meet you. This way, my office is on the 2nd floor," he said, showing Danny to the elevator. Digging his hands deep into his jacket pockets, Danny followed the man. They just exited the elevator on the 2nd floor when Gideon's phone rang. "Sorry, give me a minute," he said, picking up the old Nokia from his pocket, and answered it. "Gideon here." Raising an eyebrow, Danny listened to the conversation, biting his lower lip as he did. "I'll be right there," said Gideon before hanging up. "I'm sorry, Danny. There's a situation. Can you go back downstairs and wait? I'll be right there," he said before turning to the emergency stairs beside the elevator. "Sure," said Danny, walking back into the elevator with no intention of doing what the psychiatrist wanted. Gideon got to the top of the stairs and opened the door to the roof. Normally it would have been locked for safety reasons, but someone must have forgotten to lock it after taking a smoke on the roof. There were 4 other persons on the roof. 2 nurses and one of Gideon's interns were standing close to the door he'd just come out of. The 4th was a young teen Gideon recognized as a patient who had sessions with his intern. The teenager was balancing on the edge of the roof, his arms stretched out as he looked down. Carefully, Gideon moved over to his intern. "What's going on?" he asked, but he could already tell what was happening. "Long story short, we were supposed to have a meeting, and when I went down to the waiting room to get him, he wasn't there. The receptionist said that he had gone into the elevator. When I was looking around for him, I found the roof door open and him standing on the edge. The intern explained, biting his thumbnails nervously. He wasn't prepared for something like this, and that's why he had called Gideon. Tell me about the kid, why is he here? Gideon trailed off as he saw a second teen, one he had told to go back down, walk up to the low wall the other teen was standing on, and stepped onto it. Danny, what are you doing? Gideon shouted at the black-haired boy. Danny still had his hands in his pockets as he looked over the edge, down at the street below. Just having a look, he answered Gideon before turning his eyes to the teenager beside him. A scrawny guy with curly brown hair and brilliant green eyes, dressed like Danny in a winter jacket, old t-shirt and loose-fitting jeans. You gotta go head first if you want to kill yourself from this height, he remarked to the other teen. The teenager's eyes flickered over to Danny before locking onto the building across the street. You should get down. You don't want to fall, he said nervously. Shrugging, Danny looked over at the social service building across from them. I've fallen from higher heights and survived. That's why I'm telling you to dive head first if you want to kill yourself. It's a higher chance you'll die that way. Daniel, don't encourage him, said Gideon, warningly, standing only a couple of feet away from the two teenagers. I don't know if it's encouraging to know that if you fail, you won't only be hurting yourself, but everyone around you, both physically and psychically. Danny nodded down at the street. There are a lot of people down there. Jumping won't only hurt you, but inflict unimaginable injuries on them as well. The teenager bit his lip and clenched his hands. What do you know? Jumping is better than going home. Gideon looked over at the intern, who walked up to him and whispered in the older man's ears. His parents are going through a messy divorce. Shifting his stance, Danny sighed. Sure, but do you want to hurt your parents, or just get away from the troubles at home? The green eyes flashed at Danny before returning to staring at the building across from them. I can promise you that jumping will hurt your parents, your friends, and anyone who ever known you. You don't know a thing, the teenager said, but it didn't sound as sure as he had a moment before. You're right, I don't know how it feels to stand at the precipice of a dark chasm. It's not like I haven't considered jumping when everything got too much for me to handle. He turned to look straight at the other teenager. I almost set myself on fire back then. Why didn't you? The green-eyed boy asked, looking at Danny out of the corner of his eye. Shrugging, Danny glanced down at the people on the street. Some were starting to notice them. My sister. She found out how much I was hurting, and stopped me before I could take the plunge. Swallowing, the teenager looked down as well. How? He asked, the words getting stuck in his throat. By seeing everything from a different perspective. By talking to someone. He nodded at the people on the roof. These people are here to help you. They're here to listen to you. I'm here to hear what you have to say. Clenching his jaw, the teenager lifted his head towards the rainy sky. How? Where do I begin? Is this yet just... He lifted his right foot from the low wall. Tell me your name, Danny asked, his voice calm, but his muscle tense. It's easy. I'll go first. My name is Danny Fenton. I'm 16 and social services removed me from my home, thinking my parents were hurting me. Danny began, wondering if he was saying the right words. The teenager blinked and looked straight at Danny for the first time, but didn't say anything for a while. His eyes never left Danny, puzzling over what he had just said. Danny was getting nervous that the other people on the roof were going to interrupt at any moment, but they didn't. They waited. Neil Jackson, 15, and I'm afraid of heights, Neil finally said, his right foot returning to rest on the edge. I could not have guessed that you were afraid of heights, said Danny, a bit more relaxed. They say you need to be real brave to decide to jump as a means of suicide. Neil's eyes moved down to stare at the street below. I guess I should have taken a taller building, he remarked. Yeah, but jumping still isn't the surest way to kill yourself, unless you fall off a plane without a parachute, which I heard people can still survive from. The rain was picking up, soaking everyone on the roof, making the people on the ground hurry for shelter or umbrellas. Should have hung myself in my room instead of trying to do something creative. Neil's eyes were starting to glisten. But you didn't want your mom and dad finding you, right? Asked Danny, having considered the same thing once. Nodding, Neil rocked from one foot to the other. What do I do now? He asked, avoiding Danny's eyes again. You take a step back, knowing that people will catch you if you fall," said Danny, glancing over at Gideon and his intern, who were both slowly moving closer. Neil didn't stop rocking, his fingers fidgeting with the zipper of his jacket. "Can you tell me something?" he asked, stopping his rocking. "Sure. What do you want me to tell you?" Danny's muscles were threatening to start cramping if he didn't relax soon. Turning around to face him, Neil opened his mouth to speak, and a gust of wind pushed him off his balance and over the edge. Closing the distance between the two of them, Danny gripped Neil's outstretched hand and held on as gravity tilted to pull him down with Neil as well. Screaming, Neil gripped Danny's arm with his free hand, kicking at the wall, trying to get a grip with his feet. "Stop kicking," said Danny between gritted teeth. Leaning back as much as he could, his feet slipped on the wet concrete. In a flash, ice bit into the wall, freezing Danny's shoes to it. Two strong arms gripped Danny around his waist, pulling both him and Neil back onto the roof, the ice on Danny's shoes giving away at his command. The two teenagers hit the roof hard, letting go of each other. Before Danny could do anything, Gideon gripped the underside of his arm and pulled him up and out of the way of his intern and the two nurses. That quickly swept Neil away and into the building. End of chapter 31. Chapter 32. "Are you all right?" Gideon asked Danny when they were alone. He still had a hard grip around Danny's bicep and sounded more startled than Danny felt. Shrugging, Danny jerked his arm out of Gideon's grip. "I'm fine. What are you going to do to Neil?" he asked, looking at the rooftop door, which Neil had just been taken through. "Help him," sighed Gideon. "Come on, we'll get soaked if we stay up here any longer." Gideon gave Danny a light push before walking over to the door and opening it. The two walked down the stairs in silence till Gideon stopped. "I just have to ask, but what made you get up on that wall?" Stopping, Danny pushed back his now soaking wet hair. "I didn't want him to jump," he began. "I knew I could talk him down, so I did." A wrinkle appeared on Gideon's forehead. "Because you knew what he was going through?" he asked. Rubbing at his temple, Danny turned around. "I wasn't going to tell you that," he said, regretting talking about the darkest moment of his life. "Do you want to talk about it?" asked Gideon. Shaking his head, Danny glanced at the man. He had no reason to trust Gideon. He had no reason to open up to him. "I'm just here because my social worker said I had to talk to a shrink if I wanted to get back to my parents. I haven't known you long enough to talk about things not even my closest friends knows about." The corner of Gideon's mouth turned up in a soft smile. "You are right," he said, checking his watch. "Let's go to my office, instead of standing in the open like this." Danny's hair had almost dried when he and Gideon walked out of the elevator into the entrance hall. "Ah, Dr. Stone, there you are," a red-haired woman dressed in a red suit said from the reception desk. "Dr. Artsep, I believe you are in the wrong building," said Gideon calmly, before glancing back to see Danny standing still, his eyes hard on the woman. "Oh, Daniel! My, I see you found yourself a new psychiatrist. I was glad to hear you had gotten someone as open-minded as Gideon." She smiled, walking over to the two of them. Having considered what he'd do if he ever found himself face to face with a red-haired woman ever again, Danny dug his hands into his pockets and kept his mouth shut. Noticing Danny's strange reaction, Gideon took a step to the side, getting in between Dr. Art and the boy. "I'm not sure if I should take that as a compliment or an insult, Dr. Art. However, I think you should leave now. If you want to talk to me, make an appointment through the normal channels." "Of course I will. I was just wondering how Neil was doing. Your intern told me he just attempted to jump off the roof of this building," Dr. Art asked, her green eyes moving to meet Danny's. "I don't discuss patients in front of other patients," said Gideon, putting his hand on his hip. "Now, will you leave, or do you have to bother security?" Giving Gideon a look of mock surprise, Dr. Art put a hand on her bosom. "You don't have to be rude. I was just trying to find out how my patient was doing, only to find you with another one of my young ones. If I didn't know better, I would think you were stealing them from me." "Please, Dr. Artsep, we are both professionals. I would not steal your patients. Out of professional courtesy, I am now giving you one last chance to leave before I call the guard," said Gideon coldly. Smiling, Dr. Arch stepped around him to Danny. "I'm sorry things didn't work out between us, but I'll always be just across the street, ready to cheer you up if this place ever gets too dark," she said, putting a comforting hand on Danny's shoulder. His aching head suddenly felt as if it was going to explode. His vision blurring, Danny's eyes flashed green before he closed them, stepping away from the woman, feeling even more exhausted than he had earlier that day. Opening his eyes to glare at the woman, small dots of light flashed at the corner of his field of vision, and he blinked as a shiver went up his spine, triggering his ghost sense. "Take care, Danny," Dr. Penelope Archsep said, smiling down at him. "I'll see you soon, Dr. Stone," she said to Gideon before turning and walking through the front doors. "I don't understand that woman," said Gideon, shaking his head and turning to Danny. Face palming, Danny rubbed at his eyes. "I am an idiot. Archsep, how did I not think about that earlier?" "You okay, Danny?" asked Gideon, getting a bit worried over the boy's reaction. "Yeah, I better be off," said Danny, turning towards the doors, his thoughts far away. End of chapter 32. Thank you for listening.